go to Lake Cowichan. Yeah, I had to go to Lake Cowichan to get my cedar for the logs for the totem poles.
Oh, is that right? That's very cool.
Omar, are you there, or are you're cutting out a little bit, hun?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm here, Carrie. We're live here, so let me hit it up here. Hey guys, welcome to the show here this afternoon. We're live here with our friend Brian Forrester, the modern day Indiana Jones archaeologist, researcher, world explorer. Brian Forrester live with us here today. Carrie, go on, pick it up from here.
Uh-oh.
Are you there?
Omar, you cut out.
Brian, are you
We
there?
have a lot of problems with Facebook going live in the beginning of
Uh,
the show. So, um,
Am I there? Can you hear me?
he'll be back.
okay. Oop.
Am I there? Can you guys hear me?
No, you're cutting out.
Okay, Carrie.
Yeah.
Carrie, pick up the show.
Okay. Well, Brian, I've been trying to be Facebook friends with you for about a year now. You're quite the popular guy. You're at your limit of friends. I don't know if you know that. So,
Yeah.
I don't know where to start with you. There's so much. In researching you for the show, I've followed you for about a year and a half now, just on Facebook, and I know you have books out and you have tours coming up, and you really do so much. It's hard to get a grasp on where to start with you. So where would you like to start?
Honestly, anywhere you'd like to start is fine.
Okay. Okay, well, why don't we start in Egypt?
Okay.
That's a popular topic for a lot of people. I had been thinking about, looking at your research, I think you and I have a common thought. You believe that the pyramids are older than what mainstream archaeology believes. And I tend to believe that also. The pyramids are arranged to mimic Orion's belt, and they would have had to have been made at least 12,500 years ago to meet what it looked like in the sky at that time. What are your thoughts on when that was built, and by who?
Well, I hate to be boastful, but I think it's quite obvious that the pyramid.
Sorry, guys. This Skype here is giving us issues again, but you guys know how the drill goes. It's usually like this for the first couple of minutes.
Hello? Anyone?
Hello.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, I'm
Anybody?
back. You're back.
Oh, I'm back.
We have a eyeball. That's Omar. Omar, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you. Hello?
Okay, let me check if we're still live.
Yeah, we're still live here.
We have a moderator looking at our group to make sure that questions come through to us.
Okay.
Yeah,
So let me
this is
check with
an
her.
ongoing issue, usually with Facebook for the usually for about the first 5 minutes, the call
Facebook
falls,
is really
yeah,
kind of
the
a turd to us.
calls fall through. Okay,
Is
Brian,
this audio or is this video as well?
this is video as
It's
well.
video as well,
Yeah, it's video
Okay.
and audio.
which is unique. Right now, we're the only group doing the live video.
Uh-huh.
So it's kind of pioneering for us, and a lot of times we have a little bit of problems, sometimes reverb, but it looks like we're back.
Yeah,
So
Okay.
Usually
as
for
you were saying,
usually for the first 5 minutes. See? Oh man. Okay. Brian, are you there?
Sorry. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry about that, Brian. This is you know, I've noticed that for the past 10, 12 shows that we've done, usually for the first 5 minutes, the Facebook gives us a little bit of an issue, and especially with Skype, and the call falls through. But it seems that we're on track here now. So
Okay.
go ahead and give us a little bit of your insights into Egypt, Brian.
Well, I've been there 4 times, and we go with usually at least one geologist and probably 3 or 4 engineers, stonemasons, and other professional people. And we haven't had one of those experts believe that the dynastic Egyptians could have constructed, for example, the Great Pyramid because it's simply too big and too complicated. Also, some of your listeners may not know, but there is a whole series and system of tunnels and shafts on the Giza Plateau that go for miles, at least 10 levels under the Giza Plateau. I've been to level 3, and there's no way that a Bronze Age culture like the dynastic Egyptians could have done that work because even with cranes and crane helicopters and diamond saws and things today, it would be very difficult for us to construct the Great Pyramid, which is only one of many enigmatic artifacts that we find in Egypt.
Now the Aswan quarry is where most of the stones are quarried and then they're moved to like Saqqara, for instance. That's 1,000 kilometers to be moving these megaton stones. Now, as you say, the Bronze Age people, you know, there's no way that they could have, managed to move these megaton stones. Now, who do you think built these, and how did they move these stones to their positions?
Well, to be honest, when you refer to a
last time you
Bronze
told
Age
me to do a private,
culture,
remember,
which
and it
the
wasn't?
dynastic
Yeah.
Egyptians were, up until about 800 BC, and the pyramids were supposedly built 2500 BC.
Did you see that
You
pop up just
can't
now?
cut
There was a pop
granite
up over here on
with
Skype that
bronze
said there was
tools.
a
It's
problem with our internet
impossible.
connection, but
You
it
know, it's
popped, it
simply
disappeared.
impossible. You can't harden bronze. You can't even harden bronze to the point where you can cut granite. So that's,
Right.
you know, they simply couldn't have done the work.
Yeah,
So
you
the
can have,
question is
but
who did?
getting pinged. Yeah,
And
yeah.
what you
Good call.
honestly see is we see evidence
Yeah.
of circular saw blades 20 feet in diameter and 3/8 of an inch thick.
Right.
And we don't have any material in the 21st century
Yeah, we don't
that can
we want nothing
that
happening
can
bad
make a
when he
saw
comes
blade
on,
that
right?
big out of and that thin,
Yeah.
as well as
Sorry
drill
about
holes.
that.
We see evidence of core drill holes that would have been
Did you
done
hear
with a
from
machine
Kelly Smith yet?
500
Oh, you
times
did.
more
That's right, because we're
efficient
just
than
going to do it on the
modern
phone, right?
drills
He's just
with
going to call.
diamonds. So we're
Okay.
looking at an ancient culture
I'm
with
excited about this
profound technical
technology. I'm
capability.
excited to talk to him about this.
Some people refer to them as the Kemetians because the
But
original
I just
name
PM'd you. You were
in
busy.
Egypt is
I just
Kemet,
PM'd you and said I
which
don't
means
see
the black
Caroline on
man.
the calendar or that
But you
Ukrainian
can't,
guy. Now the Ukrainian guy we were still working
honestly,
with,
you
but
can't
didn't we?
say
She's the one that we
that
called the other
it's
day. Remember when?
impossible that aliens did the work. I
Yeah.
have to be open to that idea because I don't think humanity was
Okay.
ever evolved high enough
See,
to be
that's
able
what I
to
thought.
achieve
You
that
told
because
me there was a
we think we're the
bunch that we
highest
had, and I'm looking at the
level of
calendar going, well,
existence
I see like
now.
8,
So
but I thought
who
we
could
had
it
more
have
like
been
10 or
who could it
15
have been in the past that would
for
have
this month. And I
invented,
looked over
invented
next month, and
the
I'm
idea
excited
of
about that guy
Atlantis, but
with
there's
talking
no
about the
actual
Anunnaki. That's going to be
hard
cool.
evidence
Because
of
I
hard
wanted to. I'm
evidence of
glad that
who the
somebody
Atlanteans
finally
were.
stepped up so we can talk about
Now, I
that.
think
That's one of the biggest
now I'm
draws in
gonna
my group is people talk about the Anunnaki all the time. So I'm happy with that. So cool. Okay, send me that stream. I'm actually on the phone over here with my wife in Virginia, and she's waiting, being very patient, being quiet. Say hi to Omar, baby.
Hi, Omar.
Can you hear? He said, "Hi, how are you?"
I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
So give me that link, and I'll take a look at that, and then give me a few minutes while I can finish up with her, and then I'll get back to you, and then I'll look at that, and we'll see what you need to do. This is it right now. You just called me from. Is that what you're saying? right now that you called me from is that other account you're talking about? Oh, okay. Oh, okay, okay. Oh, okay. Right.
There. Now, do you think that that
Right.
may have been the home base for the Paracas people?
Yeah, I will definitely. Cool.
No, because I've done a lot of
All right.
research. There were similar looking people who lived up in the Lake Titicaca area,
Hmm.
and actually had even had larger skulls than the Paracas. We
Wow.
recently went. Yeah, my latest few postings on my website show that. I was with a radiologist from the United States, and we found this tiny museum that had what he decided was a 12-year-old female, and her skull was at least, or is at least, twice as big as mine. It's literally vertically a cone head, and when he looked at that, he said, "That's not a human being." And he was honest about that.
Hmm.
And then next to it is a fetus of a 7 to 9 month old that had been stillborn, and the skull again is vertically elongated and is the size of its torso. So I think there's definitely a connection between paranormal activity, UFO activity, and the skulls that we recently found, which we would love to DNA test.
Now, you currently had some testing done on the Paracas skulls?
We did. We had three of them tested. Hair samples were sent to labs both in Canada and the United States. There are very few labs in the world that can study ancient DNA because as soon as you die, your DNA starts to break down. So after 2,000 years, it's only the finest machines in the world that can analyze. And they found the only haplogroups, which is your ethnicity, the only haplogroups they found are either from Northern Europe or the Middle East.
Hmm.
And so that makes the Paracas very different from most Native American people.
Wow.
Do you
Did
think?
they have red?
Sorry,
The
go ahead,
skull
Carrie.
that you, in the photograph that I was looking at on your Facebook page, it appears that they had a reddish color hair.
Yes, and that too traces back to the Middle East.
Hmm.
Now,
Very interesting.
they found giants in North America, and that had red hair. Do you think that they're
Yes.
somehow they're connected?
Possibly. Red hair is the rarest type of hair color on the planet,
Hmm.
and most people think that it originates from Ireland, but it's actually from Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan, which is also more or less the cradle of ancient civilization when you go back to Sumeria, etc. So I definitely think there is a connection, but my belief is that the Paracas arrived from somewhere in the Middle East about 3,000 years ago by sea,
Hmm.
whereas most Native American people traveled what's called the Bering Land Bridge 12,000 plus years ago from Siberia. These people were seafarers.
Do you think that Akhenaten, because it appears that Akhenaten has an elongated cranium, do you think that he could be somehow connected to the Paracas skulls?
It's a really intriguing question. They've never found Akhenaten's body,
Hmm.
so we can't tell. But I just finished a book about him because he's the most interesting of all the pharaohs
Yeah.
in a lot of ways. And so I think what he was referring to was he allowed his artists to make sculptures of himself and his daughters having elongated heads. And I think what he was doing was he was trying to tell the general public, not that he looked like that, but that his ancestors looked like that.
I see. Now, I had An interesting thought there. About a few months ago, I was looking at some pictures from Easter Island, the Moai, and I happened to notice that one of the Moai, when they were showing the body, its stomach, it looks something pretty familiar or similar to Akhenaten. Do you think that Akhenaten and the Moai, they could be um, like related somehow?
I don't think directly, but the interesting thing about Easter Island, like the whole history of the planet has been so corrupted by universities and governments, and finally with the internet, we're able to unravel this stuff, and especially by traveling to these places too, you learn 100 times more on location than you could reading books or anything like that. And there's a very interesting written script that Easter Island had, which is called Rongo Rongo. And no other Polynesian people had it. So the question is, where did it come from? And interestingly, it's closely related to a similar script from the Indus Valley, as in India. So it could be that the original inhabitants of Easter Island, long before the Polynesians arrived, came from somewhere in India and had red hair, again.
That red hair seems to be an ongoing coincidence in all of this and throughout the world, really. Now, you just wrote a book called Akhenaten. Can you tell us a little bit about that book?
Sure. Well, as I said, Akhenaten is I think, the most curious of all of the pharaohs, because he was murdered, as was Nefertiti and their daughters, by the Amun priesthood. And the priesthood, they weren't simply priests, they actually controlled politics, religion, and the finances of Egypt. And that's why Akhenaten, when he was growing up, he was so disgusted by this, he changed his name from Amenhotep IV to Akhenaten, which means the shadow of Aten, and Aten is the high universal creator force. So he also moved the capital city from Thebes and created a whole new city, and that's why when he did that, he put all of the Amun priesthood out of work, and so that's why they plotted to kill him, and they not only killed him and his family, but they also basically destroyed the entire city that he had built down to rubble. If you go there today, you can see nothing. And they also tried to erase him from history. So that's why I wrote the book, because he's an absolutely fascinating figure from history.
Is the book out and available for purchase?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
On Amazon? Okay. Do you think, I just watched a show maybe 2 weeks ago, and they are claiming in Egypt to have found a scroll that was basically a diary of a worker who built the pyramids, built the Great Pyramid. So do you think that kind of stuff is propaganda? Do you think it's because a lot of us do not believe that they were built when mainstream archaeology is saying they were built? So when you see something like that and it contradicts all the other things that you've researched and sought out on your own, do you think that is to deliberately mislead people to continue to believe that falsehood that they've put out there?
Yeah, I saw an article about that, but they showed one kind of crappy picture, so they'll have to present a lot more evidence than that. Again, the construction of the Great Pyramid and the tunnel system is basically beyond 21st century technology. So I think you're right. I think it is a bit of propaganda, and they are starting to fight back, because we're applying science to the study of the pyramids, whereas archaeology is kind of a soft science. That's why engineers are fascinated to go and see how almost impossible the construction of some of the works in Egypt are. So the good thing is that I don't think the standard academics will succeed in anything anymore, because they shot all their bullets, and we're manufacturing lots of bullets.
With the new director of antiquities, more truthful information will be coming forward? about the pyramids and Egypt in general.
I hope so, because the problem has been that archaeology, like a lot of different disciplines, is a boys and girls club. And if you're a member, then you make agreements with each other as to what history was. Anyone who steps outside of that box gets vilified and disgraced and kicked out. And so I don't think they'll have any choice, because as these people cling on to their belief system and they're being pounded by scientific evidence to the contrary, eventually they'll have to either retire or admit that they don't know the whole picture.
Chris Dunn has suggested that the Great Pyramid is a power plant. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Chris Dunn is a very brilliant man. He's a master people call him an engineer, but he's actually a master machinist, and that's somebody who works with incredible tight tolerances. He used to build specialized parts for jet engines, and you can't get more accurate, or there's no discipline that requires more accuracy than that. So that's why his eye was attracted to seeing machine marks, etc., which are all over the Giza Plateau. It's not like there's one saw cut or a drill hole. It's all over the place. And as soon as you start to see, you see more and more and more. I think, I don't think it was an electrical system. I think it was an energetic system that created vibration. Basically like a Wi-Fi system in some ways. We have to think of some analogy. And I think that the obelisks were the receiving stations, and the Giza pyramids were the transmitters. Energy used for what, though, is the problem. And that's why I have to go back once a year, because I always fill up with questions over the course of a year.
Kind of something like a Tesla coil?
Yeah, I think Tesla... Yeah, I don't think Tesla invented anything. He discovered ancient information and brought it into the 20th century. That was his brilliance and also his downfall.
Now, we have two different types of pyramids on this planet. We have step pyramids and we have pointed pyramids. What do you think the purpose for those two different types of construction are? Do you think that one could be a positive and the other a negative? Because there has to be some sort of an explanation as to why they constructed these mega pyramids and built them differently, as to one being step and the other one being as a pyramidal shape as we see today.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. And there are pyramids all over the place, and they're always regarded as sacred structures used for ceremony, etc. The difference between the ones in Egypt, though, is, or to contrast the ones in Egypt, the other ones, like in Central and South America, for example, and Mexico, were meant to be climbed. You know, there's staircases that go to the top. So that's, I think, more of a connection between the heavens, or the gods, and the earth. You also tend to have water running underground, which can set up a subtle electrical current. So I think they were all used for energetic purposes of different kinds, but our word pyramid actually comes from the Greek, which is pyromedos, which means the fire in the middle, or the fire within, which describes energy. And they got that term from the ancient Egyptians, because, of course, they went to Egypt and said, what are these big structures? And they were told those are perneters, which means the house of nature, which could be house of energy. So they translated that as pyramid, or pyromedos.
Wow.
So where you get the big discrepancy. How could the Great Pyramid system have been the first ones built, and yet they're the finest? And then after that, you get kind of crappy ones made. Either the Egyptians lost a lot of information, or they had nothing to do with the construction of the initial ones.
And that's what you had suggested before, where we had an advanced civilization that had worked with granite, and they had the technology to cut granite blocks and then to move them. And then suddenly after that, we're having people that are working with smaller stones and limestone on top of that, which is of course a lighter stone. And you've shown a lot of examples in your videos to where one side is very ancient, and the other side is constructed differently with limestones, and then they're stacked, and especially down in South America as well, where they've people have used mortars or mortar to fill in the empty spaces, which is very obvious that different civilization has built that. Now, when you speak to the people in South America and ask them about these structures, they always tell you that they've come upon these. Now, is there like, is there like a story that goes along with that that most people don't know?
I believe so, because the problem is that, for example, with the Inca culture, the famous Inca, almost all of the history written about them was done by the Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
The Spanish were the ones who destroyed their civilization. So when I've read all the Spanish accounts, and so living here, I'm trying to collect the oral tradition of the people themselves. And one simple example is that when the Spanish first entered the city of Cusco, which was the Inca capital, and they found this mega wall called Sacsayhuaman, with stones as large as 125 tons,
Mm-hmm.
they turned to the Inca. They turned to the Inca and said, "Did you build this?" And the Inca said, "No, this was here when we got here." So that proves that Cusco itself was a megalithic city that the Inca found about 1,000 years ago.
Now, I spoke to Steve Strong a few weeks ago, and he suggested that humanity began out of Australia, and that in South America, their ancestors come from Australia. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've heard there are some links between, I think there's a tribe in Brazil, in the jungle of Brazil, that is genetically related to the Aborigines. I think there's some evidence that there's been transport between Australia and maybe the Patagonia in southern South America, but that's why, we've started to do the genetic DNA testing, and we're planning on doing a lot more, but it's very expensive and incredibly time-consuming, and we need approval from the Peruvian government, which has taken a year and a half. So I'm not a big fan of that theory in terms of there being a lot of contact between Australia and South America. I think there's a lot more movement of people from different parts of the world to South America, including possibly the ancient Chinese, definitely from the Middle East at different times, and maybe from Europe via the Atlantic as well. It's all, all of this is ongoing. That's why it's so much fun, because you'll never reach the end of the story. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger.
That's right, more questions.
Yeah, and I have an interesting thought as I was doing the research for this show today. Are you familiar with Steve Meads? He
No.
wrote a book called The Chauvet Cave, Dreams Unlocked. And are you familiar with the Chauvet Caves in France?
Oh yeah, sure.
Pardon? I'm sorry, you froze up there. Oh no. Okay, there you are.
Ah,
Do you know about the caves? The Chauvet
Yeah.
Cave? Okay.
Yeah.
So Steve kind of saw something different in those caves, and he wrote a book about it, and he can put a lot of the pictures from the cave with locations in Egypt. Now, the Chauvet Caves have been radiocarbon dated. 180 items in that cave were radiocarbon dated to 36 to 38,000 years ago. Do you think it would be possible that, well, anything's possible, but do you think it's plausible that those caves could have actually been, not drawn from, looking forward, like someday there'll be this place, Egypt, and it'll, be by this river, but more so have been maybe drawn of what was already there?
Great point. That's what I was going to say. I mean
Yeah. I could
I'm
spin
ha-
on this stuff
I'm-
all day long. It just blows your mind.
Yeah, yeah. Well, what I say is the megalithic work that we find in Peru and Bolivia and Egypt and Lebanon and parts of Turkey and the west coast of Italy, on and on and on, is pre-cataclysmic. So I think it's all 12,000. I say 12,000 plus years old. But I can't go farther back in time. If somebody said 35,000 and showed evidence, then I'd go, okay, I can accept that.
Now, carbon
Yeah,
dating
that's
is,
what kind of made me think about it. The Younger Dryas impact event was, pretty much has been dated at 11,500, 12,000 years ago. So this cave is proving to be 36 to 38,000 years ago and wasn't affected by that. And it's got all this evidence of maps of Egypt with the, everything laid out. And it just really kind of got me going on that. Like, could it have been that they were there 38,000 years ago and they were mapping what was already there? So something for you to check into and get back to me on, Brian.
I will.
I'll put that in my notes that you're going to get back to me.
it's the
Okay, actually, sorry, can you tell me how to spell the name of the caves?
CHAUVET, Chauvet Caves, and
Chauvet.
Steve Mead's book is called The Dream Unlocked. Actually, I'll send you a link, and
Okay, great.
and then maybe you can you can have a looky-loo at that. Now, speaking of maps, we have a Piri Reis map that dates back long time, and on that map we have precise geographical positions of Antarctica, ice-free, and as well as South America. Now, where do you think these maps came from?
That's a great question, and there are likely a lot more that are hiding in places like the Vatican Library. It's even believed that that the way that Columbus found the Americas was that because he was living in Genoa, supposedly some fishermen had returned after going through a horrific storm and actually wound up on the east coast of the Americas, and they mapped it. And then they brought it back, and he was able to get access to it. And so that's how he was able to convince Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand to allow him to have his expedition, because he knew the landmass was there. The most intriguing thing is showing that Antarctica is ice-free, and actually that it's not one island, it's at least two massive islands. And that was only mapped by the American scientists, I think, in the 1950s. So that's still a super puzzle as to how old maps are and how many more there are that are being hidden away.
Do you think that there could be clues in the Ramayana and the Mahabharata Indian stories? Maybe
Sure.
there's clues.
I regard all oral tradition and written tradition as being the truth. Too many academics regard indigenous people's stories as being something they made up around the campfire, but it's their oral tradition. And so when we're hoping to go to India in January, and there's a lot of megalithic stuff there. So if we're able to find machine tool marks and stuff, then that could help to support that these ancient Indian traditions are telling the truth.
I'm quite certain that they're telling the truth, and I support the oral stories myself. Like up here in Canada, we have the Aboriginal, the First Nations, and they didn't really have a written form of language. And most of the stories were told, through orally and from father to son and mother to daughter, and for instance, keeps going on like that. And then now we have these stories that have come to us, and and finally we're beginning to write these down. Now, Robert Bouval, he has proposed and discovered that 12,500 years ago, the Egyptian pyramids were in line with the Orion's belt, and that's kind of the time that we've come up with now as a marker, anyways. Now, what do you think? Do you think that the precessional cycles could be far older than 12,500 years?
Uh, could very well be. And if you look at the work of John Anthony West, he believes that the Sphinx, for example, is at least a precession and a half old. So that's like 50,000 years old. So it is quite possible.
What do you think the Sphinx was in the beginning?
I think it was a lion.
We think a lot alike. I have to agree with that. It's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, and also the Sphinx faces the rising of Sirius.
Hmm.
So then you get into I think so. If you there's no question that the face has been recarved at least once, and it's way out of proportion to the body. Everything else is in kind of nice proportion, and then you have this squished little head. So according to the Cometian traditions, it was a massive lion, and the lion is symbolic of the Great Mother, because they were very much into matriarchy in the distant past, and she's also the gateway to the Giza Plateau. So she's on top of part of this big system of tunnels as well. So she's also symbolically in charge of the water system.
How do you get so much access? You seem
Because
to really get in there and get all the good stuff for us.
because I have to, I have to. Whenever I see a door that's locked or a sign that says keep out, then I try to find influence to be able to get in, because they're usually hiding really juicy secrets in these places, and we have a right as human beings to know our history. So unless it's
Cool.
unless it's super dangerous, but it's easy to influence people in Egypt and also in places like Peru to be able to get access if you know the right person. You're not trying to damage anything. What you're trying to do
Right.
is find out more about what these places were.
Have you had the chance to go in the Peruvian pyramids?
As far as I know, there aren't any Peruvian pyramids that you can actually go inside. They're basically made of adobe clay, so they're built of millions of bricks, but they're solid.
Do you think that there could be an entrance like into the pyramid somewhere, like as a chamber or something like that?
Not really, not in the case of Peru, but there are stories of a lot of tunnel systems up in the highlands around Cusco, and we're trying to get access to some of those.
Do you think there's tunnels underneath the Nazca lines? From I read somewhere that people were suggesting that there are tunnels beneath the Nazca lines as aqueducts, perhaps. Do you have any information regarding that?
Well, of course, I wrote a book about Nazca because I wanted to figure out what they represented, because whenever you have something that's enigmatic like that and you have 10 different theories and everyone insists that their theory is the only one that works, you have to research all of them and see where there's commonality. And what we do know is that there are a lot of underground rivers and streams in the Nazca area, so some of them could actually, if the river actually had dried out underground, then you could have a natural tunnel system, but the levels of technology that we see in the Nazca Paracas area is nothing compared to what we see in the highlands of Peru and Bolivia. The Nazca lines, you know, there's the Nazca lines and the Palpa lines, and the largest adobe ceremonial city is near Nazca and stuff like that. But we don't see anything really high tech. We see mysterious symbols that have to be decoded.
Who do you think built the Nazca lines?
Two different cultures. The Nazca, of course, did from about 100 AD to 5 or 600 AD. And before that, the Paracas culture, who had the elongated skulls, they actually occupied that entire area. So they were the beginners of the system. They created the largest one, which is called the Candelabro, which is 500 feet tall on the side of a mountain. I can almost see it out my window. And then, if I had binoculars, I actually could. But then they built all the way down through Nazca. And then the Nazca culture invaded from the north and exterminated the royal family of the Paracas, occupied the land, and then they continued creating more and more figures and lines and stuff like that.
Now,
We have a question. Sorry, Omar.
Go ahead.
We have
go
a question
Carrie.
from one of our viewers. That's the really cool thing about doing a live show, is that they can ask us questions to ask you while we're right here. So Blake was wondering, what is your favorite culture to study?
That's like saying, who's your favorite child? It's at the moment I'm starting to write a book about the Maya because there was so much hype up until 2012. I don't want to know anything about the Maya because that got so incredibly stupid. So finally, 4 years after that, I'm starting to get into the Maya because having been in Mexico in February, their artwork is just so mind-boggling. But I would say in my heart of hearts, the Paracas from here are my favorite culture because academics don't study them. There's very little you can find on the internet. It's just weird. As I was researching for a book I'm trying to finish about the Paracas, very little scholarly information. Most of the websites that I was able to find were stuff about me. So, these people had elongated heads. They were 6 feet tall. They had red hair. They probably had white skin. They lived in houses underground. There's so much that no academics are studying these people, and I find it completely bizarre.
I find it completely with the norm of covering up and, keeping things hidden from us.
Right.
Now, I've always had an interest in the band of holes that we find in South America. What do you think they are, and the meaning behind that? Because there's like thousands.
Sorry, the what?
The band of holes that are down in.
Oh, that's.
They're like little
Yeah.
pits. They're little
Well-
pits, and I've heard so many theories about them. I'd like to hear, like what you think they are.
Well, the funny thing is that I'm just starting to use iMovie to make videos because it's way better than the other one, the crappy Windows one I was using. And I'm literally uploading right now a video about the band of holes that I filmed with my quadcopter. So it'll be out later today. It's got supposedly 2 hours to go. But I was able to get really great quadcopter footage of it. It's in the middle of nowhere. Mm-hmm. It's on the side of a mountain. And when you see the video, I think you'll get a kick out of it. But I think the best theory is that it was part of the geoglyph system made by the Paracas. And according to Juan Navarro, who was my teacher, he speculated that, because there are like 2,000 or 3,000 of these holes, each one's about the size of a hot tub. And they literally snake up this mountainside. So they're in the form of a snake with the head at the bottom, which is a cemetery. And he believed that actually what it was is that they planted green bushes in each one of the holes. And since the whole area is desert, if they kept it watered, you'd have this 2 kilometer long green snake looking at you. So I think that's the theory. It's a very intelligent theory. Yeah.
Amazing. I've never heard that before. I've heard like all kinds of things that their vehicle tracks or on the show Ancient Aliens there I think they had mentioned that they were using those and they made fire in them and using them as codes to perhaps send a message to someone out in space. Um, but this is the most interesting one actually I've heard. Actually, it makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah, sorry, but there's actually, I've been there 4 times, I guess. There's no charcoal anywhere.
mhm.
So
That's what I was gonna say. It's funny that Ancient Aliens sometimes, I mean, I like the show, but sometimes they throw stuff out there and there's like no evidence for it. We all
Exactly.
know that
Yeah.
there's no evidence of fire having been lit in those holes, but yet that's
No.
what threw at us. Kind of strange.
no, yeah, you would find a bit of charcoal in at least a few of them, and we've walked from one end to the other, looking for were they tombs or whatever. The only bones we found is at the very bottom. There's this big bulbous part which represents the head of the snake, and that is still full of bones, human bones.
Oh,
But
wow.
but no, I think in the 2 kilometers, I picked up 2 pieces of pottery, so they're not tombs. No charcoal, so it looks like ancient soil too. So that's why Senior Juan believed that they had planted plants, and there is a river nearby, so they could bucket the water up and keep the plants alive.
Do you think it could be something similar as the Serpent Mound in Ohio?
Something symbolic like that, yeah, because in a lot of indigenous cultures, the serpent is a very prominent symbol. It's only likely in Christianity where it's diabolical. Most ancient cultures believe that the serpent represented wisdom, which I believe in too.
Yeah, same here. We see the serpent really through and through all over the world. No matter where we see the serpent is always showing up. Now,
Hmm.
the Saqqara pyramid and the Bent pyramid, the archaeologists and the mainstream academia, they tell us that the Bent pyramid, for instance, was a mistake. I myself, don't believe, nor do I think that the ancients made mistakes, of that caliber, of that magnitude. I believe that the Saqqara pyramid and the Bent pyramid are probably some of the oldest pyramids on the face of, for Egypt anyhow. What do you think about that?
Well, yeah, I agree. And they are speculating so much, it's wacko. They automatically think, well, you start with something simple and then you make something more complex, which is logical, but they think that the step pyramid of Saqqara was an experiment in order to try to make a pyramidal structure, but that thing is falling apart, and I think it's much later. And also the Bent pyramid, nobody would put all that effort into building something that massive without making a drawing first in order to see if the angle's right. That's it's really stupid.
Or a scale model?
Yeah, a scale model, a drawing, something. Imagine, this is the story. They built it halfway up. This is like millions of man hours of labor. And then they go, oh my God, the angle's wrong. And they go to talk to the Pharaoh, and he says, well, correct the angle. Okay, we'll change the angle. But if you get into not only the oral tradition, but the language is really important, because the ancient language of Egypt is called Suf. And that, of course, is where Sufi comes from later. But the language is a code. And so the original name for the Bent Pyramid is, damn it, I forgot. Oh, what is it? But actually, when you translate it, it means double harmony. So that describes 2 resonances.
Now, in the Saqqara
Well, that's
pyramid,
interesting.
I just recently wrote an article on the Saqqara pyramid, and the August Marriott, he was looking for the Apis bull. Now, the Apis bull
Right.
was genetically engineered by the gods, so it wasn't nothing earthly. Now, when August Marriott went to discovered the seraphims and the tunnel system underneath Saqqara, he came across esophaguses which weigh an upwards of 100 tons. Right, the bottom weighs 60 tons, the lid is 40 tons, and now the Egyptian culture is most famous for mummification. They pretty much mummified everything: spiders, scorpions, birds, monkeys, alligators, crocodiles, kind of what have you. Now, inside that esophagus, they found, splintered, shattered, uh, broken bones filled with asphalt. Now, why do you think a culture that's almost obsessed with mummification would do this? Do this?
Well, actually, they never found any remains of anything in any of the 27 boxes at the Serapeum.
Hmm.
They supposedly found some mummified bones in the hallway, but never in the boxes themselves. And they are mind-boggling because when they were discovered, most of the lids had been tilted sideways as if something had gotten out of them. And as you said, they do, it's not an exaggeration. These boxes weigh 100 tons apiece. The top was cut from the same piece of stone as the box. And we don't have technology that can create boxes like that today out of a single piece of stone. You're talking originally, one of those blocks of stone would have weighed 200 tons at least, and would have to have been brought either from Aswan, which is 500 miles to the south, or the eastern desert, so dragged across the desert. So the Serapeum is by far the most bizarre place I've ever been, and my favorite place to visit in Egypt, because it's like from a science fiction set. It's just weird.
Wow. I actually have two questions for you. One of my own, it's kind of a personal question. At Saqqara, it seems like it was known as a healing center. There are healing temples there. Something I was researching, they had healing through sound vibration at there. Do you feel when you're there that you have any changes to your personal vibrations or your mood, your energy?
Yeah, and actually all of them. All of the ones in Peru and Bolivia and in Egypt. Egypt is very energetic still. So yeah, you definitely get a sensation that the quality of the workmanship of the so-called hospital at Saqqara is profound. Again, it's mortarless joins. It's limestone, which is not a hard stone, but it's Tura limestone, which is pure calcium carbonate. And even though, the sad thing about Egypt is most of these places have been trashed over thousands of years by invading cultures. So only portions of these things remain, but that place still retains this incredible energy of a very positive nature. And I have no hesitation into believing that these ancient people were involved in sound and vibrational healing, almost like a version of an MRI without moving parts.
Yeah, well, what I had seen was the physician would, there's like niches, and he would put his head in there and be able to, just from the vibration and the patient would be laying on the slab that they had chosen, and he would be able to, from the vibrations, determine what was wrong with this person. So just a very interesting thing, and I was wondering if that's still resonating there.
Yeah, it is.
Very cool.
I got a question from
Next
Richard.
time you go, maybe you could take me.
I've got a question
Maybe
from
I could check that out.
Richard Barron, Brian. He's asking, have you
Okay.
been to the Bosnian pyramids?
No, I've been invited by Dr. Sam many times to go. He hasn't offered me a plane ticket though, and I have no comment about the Bosnian pyramids because I don't comment about places I've never physically been to. It's too deceiving. You know, you can see a photograph taken at a certain angle that makes something look like something, but unless you have your own experience, I don't see how anybody can have an opinion about anything without personal experience. I would go. I've heard a lot of people trash, you know, the Bosnian pyramid idea, and I've heard people are in love with the idea, but I can't have an opinion unless I go.
Absolutely. Now, the ancients, we found a lot of skulls where we've have pinholes and holes in within the skulls to suggest brain surgery. Where do you think the ancients got this knowledge from? Is it something that they had from trial and error, or do you think this is something that they may have been taught by outside influence?
It's possible. Up until Inca times, the Inca did a lot of trepanation surgery like that. And again, the mysterious Paracas people who academics don't want to study, they there have been studies done. I think one study was of 200 Paracas skulls that had brain surgery, trepanation done to them, and the healing rate in terms of people living for years afterwards was more than 50%. So whether it was trial and error, I'm not sure. And the theory as to why they did it, again, the most common theory is, well, as the result of warfare. You know, somebody gets whacked on the head, and so they cut a piece of bone out to relieve the pressure. A more silly explanation is that they did it because these, you know, if somebody was mentally ill, they were filled with evil spirits, so you'd cut a hole in their head to, you know, to make it come out. I honestly think that the Paracas were experimenting with brain surgery in order to turn ancient functions back on, because as the elongated Paracas began to breed with people who were more normal in terms of brain size and skull shape, the elongated features began to disappear, and I think the higher power that they had, especially psychic power, began to dissipate. So I think they were experimenting with the glands of the brain in order to turn ancient high function back on.
Interesting.
Wow, that's a great idea.
I've always had the interest in those knobs that
Yes.
that we find almost everywhere in South America, in Egypt. What do you think they are? Like, what's the purpose
They're
of
all,
those knobs to be there to begin with?
oh, there's so many theories about that. They've also were recently found by Patricia Awiani in India as well, and they're in Greece, and anywhere you find a megalithic site, in general, you find or area you find these protrusions, and the complicated thing about them is that they had to have had a function, because you have to remove all that stone away to expose it.
Mm-hmm.
The lame story by academics is that their function was that you would be able to string a rope underneath it to be able to lift the stone up and put into position. But a lot of the larger ones don't have them at all. And so you say, well, what about these ones? And the academics say, well, they cut those ones off, but they didn't get around to cutting the rest of them off. It's like, I think I think they had an energetic function of some kind, whether they're connected with solar energy or what. You know, we're still thinking about that one, and I haven't heard any really good theory yet about it.
I heard somewhere along the grapevine that that they were used for electricity, and that some of them are burnt, that they have black marks near the knobs. Now, I'm not sure. Don't quote me on this. I'm not sure where or who I heard this from. This was just on YouTube as I was just rolling through, just looking for stuff and found something interesting. So I've just kind of made a mental note of it. Do you think it could be for that, for like use of
No,
electricity?
that
Because it is granite, and granite is it can conduct electricity.
yeah, or basalt, which has iron, which conducts electricity. And actually, that's a very good point because the main function of the tours we do is to try to entice people of, pretty smart people from different parts of the world who are intrigued with this stuff to come and present their ideas to us because I want to learn from other people more than I want to try to teach people. So we had this engineer, um, Alex Mott from England, and he was obsessed with these knobs. And inside the structure called the Coricancha, which is in Cusco, this super ancient building, there are knobs that seem to be like that. The density of the knob is different than the main stone itself. It's like they've been heat treated or melted or something. And then there are places where the knobs have been broken off. And the interesting thing is they don't break on the surface. They actually break and take a chunk of the stone with them. So that's like creating a divot. So that's why we're hoping to be able to get that stone analyzed and see if there's a difference in composition.
Is it something similar to the stone in Egypt that are rotting from the inside out?
No, that's different. That's another weird thing.
Mm-hmm.
And this last time we found Susan Moore, who's our geologist from Calgary, came with us, and she could, and the same with Robert Schock. He was there and he's looking at this, going, "What's going on with the stone?" Because it's actually it's granite and it's falling apart from the inside. So people were thinking, well, maybe the stone was part of an electrical system of some kind and got overcharged from the core, or was microwave blasted or something like that. And when I was there this last time, I noticed that, especially at Karnak, which is where we find most of this stuff, this charred, burnt, and expanded stone, it comes from the east. So I think it's part of Robert Schock's theory of plasma striking from the sun, the surface of the earth. And that's why I dragged Susan with me for 4 hours as we went from site to site, because we kept seeing it near what's called the Ramesseum as well. Like this scorching on one surface, whereas the backside isn't touched at all. And it's always from the east that this like heavy, super fast weathering occurred. So our theory is that Robert Schock's idea is right, in that the Earth was hammered by plasma ejection from the sun, which would spontaneously heat the surface of the stone, and also all of the surfaces are about 21 to 23 degrees off east. And so it's possible that our planet's tilt changed from being vertical to 23.5 degrees, and it's giving us evidence that this event actually occurred. Like, you're talking a split second of blasting of superheat.
Do you think that could be the demise of the civilization that had inhabited this planet before?
Yeah, because in talking with, we had Robert Schock on Easter Island. We also had him in Bolivia, and also the Altiplano of Peru. He was looking for evidence of this, and I was able to walk around and ask him, and he said something like that would be the equivalent of plasma lightning. You're talking millions of degrees, and so that would vaporize anything. It would vaporize any life form in the area. So you're not talking about fires going up. You're talking about people turning into powder spontaneously, as well as all vegetation, all life in that area would be gone, and likely would be uninhabitable for a long period of time after that.
Wow.
Interesting. Is that the reason why we find very little proof of that civilization, as in like biological proof of bones and graves and such? that they were possibly
Yeah,
vaporized due to the plasma?
yeah, and that's the strange thing is, where are the bodies of these great builders? They must, unless they're hiding in the Smithsonian or something. But it's plausible that's what happened. It's not only would all organic life, as in people, plants, animals, be vaporized to nothing, and actually probably not even turned to dust, turned into
Atoms?
floating in the air. And so even burials of like 6 feet deep would be scorched, and possibly any organic evidence there would also have been blasted to or heated to nothing.
Do we find this phenomenon anywhere else in the world, or just only in Egypt so far?
No, also in Cusco,
In Cusco as
and
well?
likely Pumapunku as well.
What do you think happened at Pumapunku?
I think it was destroyed by a cataclysm 12,000 years ago.
Do you think that it could be due to the uplift of Lake Titicaca? Because at one time that region was at sea level. Now, do you think that it goes back that far? The H
I
blocks?
honestly, well, I think the H blocks are at least 12,000 years old. And the great thing, though, about them is that some of them are in great shape because they were buried. They were found buried. So the mud and earth preserved the surfaces, thank God. But I think, Lake Titicaca was part of the Pacific Ocean at one point because it still contains minerals that are sea-based, and also the largest salt flat in the world is south of it. So what happened is that the Altiplano, which is where Lake Titicaca is, it tilted from north to south. It used to be 10 times the size it is now. So a great catastrophe caused the whole Altiplano to tilt, causing 90% of the water to spill down to the south, and that created this huge salt flat. But I think it took millions of years for Lake Titicaca to rise from the Pacific, but we do have evidence that a volcano to the north of Tiwanaku exploded probably 12,000 years ago, creating a tsunami on the lake, and that's what buried Pumapunku and Tiwanaku with like 10 feet of mud.
Wow. When you go there, I know you've been there, I've heard, what was it, 50 times?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I always have this natural instinct to touch things.
Yeah.
Do you, when you lay your hands on those stones, what does it feel like? I mean, do you feel vibrations? Do you feel anything?
Well, even better, now that we have, I never wanted one of these ever, but when I finally got one, it's like, my God, this is a computer.
Yeah.
And, it's a field computer. So I've got a magnetometer, I've got what else do I have here? I've got tons of Geiger counter stuff. I mean, this is like a laboratory in your palm. So 50 times is not enough for Pumapunku because it's the most bizarre place on this planet. And again, no academic study the place. But we
Wow.
had an 85-year-old engineer from England with us, and he had his iPhone with him, and he had this Tesla meter app, which I'd never heard of. And he started going up to the stones, and all of a sudden, some of the stones were making the meter just go crazy. So I grabbed it from him and ran away and explored the site for about an hour. He kept calling, Brian, can I have my phone back? It's like, no. And so for the last 4 trips, that's what I've been focusing on is the magnetic energy, and the anomalies are amazing, especially the
Really?
H blocks. Every surface is different. As you go across the H block and then inside, the meter shifts, and it's almost predictable as to whether it'll go up or down. So what we're theorizing now is that the magnetic nature and the shape of the H block go hand in hand. It's part of the whole surreal function of that. So we're going back in November and then many more times to explore that more. Thankfully we have these meters now we can take with us to start measuring this stuff, because now it adds 10 times the mystery to Puma Punku.
Oh.
Yeah, and actually on a psychic level, Puma Punku is very cold. It's very machine-like. The same thing with a lot, like all of the stuff that's pre-dynastic in Egypt. It's very cold and machine-like, functional. It's not art. But then in the area of Cusco, the polygonal stuff is so organic that it fits in with the land. It's almost like a Japanese garden that way. And so that's why I think whoever built the stuff around Cusco was completely different from Egypt, and whoever built Puma Punku and Tiwanaku, that was their only shot. They built that, they used it, and either they got wiped out or they abandoned it, and then it got wiped out.
Is there any
The
sign?
megalith wonder.
Are there any
Yeah.
signs of vitrification in any of the sites in South America or in Bolivia, Puma Punku?
Oh, maybe. That's what we have to do more work on that level with a with a geologist. Our geologist, Susan, as far as I can tell, she's been with us 3 times to Sacsayhuaman, Ollantaytambo, Machu Picchu, Puma Punku, and she hasn't found anything that she regards as being vitrification. But other people have. But to claim that means you have to take a sample or samples and have them analyzed. It's possible. There is one place called Vilcas Waman, which is a megalithic site in the mountains in the middle of nowhere, and there the surface of the polygonal wall has melted. So there is your vitrification. I sent photographs to Robert Schock, who never responded, but it's almost like, it looks like melted plastic.
Mm-hmm.
So that could again be an example of the solar plasma effect.
Do you think we'd be able to get any like a relative close date from lichen samples? If we take the lichen growth that's on the blocks and then have them analyzed, perhaps they might be able to tell us on how old possibly these stones may be.
I think that's kind of undependable, or it can tell you hundreds or maybe a few thousand years. But what we're looking at is the refinement of a new testing system called cosmogenic, which it measures the amount of cosmic energy that has penetrated stone. Mm-hmm. It can go as deep as a meter. So what it does is it chemically alters the interior of the stone itself. We've tried to have Puma Punku stone tested twice using this technique, but the first laboratory, as soon as the leadership or whoever, president of the lab, found out where the stone was, he forbade his people from testing it.
Wow.
And then, yeah, and then a second laboratory. Oh yeah, this happens all the time. And then a second laboratory in France, they said no problem, and then they tested it, and then they emailed back to us and said, I'll send you the results if you promise not to mention the name of the laboratory. And I said, okay, that's fine. I won't mention your lab. And then they wrote back and said, well, actually, we'll send your money back because the date we found cannot be different than what archaeologists believe.
Oh no,
Wow.
serious.
That's why no one's
Seriously.
studying it as well.
So
Yeah,
there's pretty much
exactly.
a systematic cover-up that's
Mm-hmm.
happening right from the genetics to straight to and to archaeology to the academics in our schools. Why do you think they're doing this, Brian? Like, I know
Well,
you
they
said
don't want his.
I know you were saying earlier,
Yeah.
that it would be that it's almost character assassination, but why keep this hidden? Why not just come out and say, okay, we were wrong, and we've uncovered more scientific evidence that suggests this and this and that. Now, why do you think that this?
Oh, do we have a story for you? DNA results from an elongated skull in Peru. L.A. Marzulli joins us in a moment. Of course, Watcher 6, The Secret Cosmic War, and so many other things that Lynn has done. We're going to be back with him in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast to Coast. First of all, let me introduce our dear friend, L.A. Marzulli, teamed up, by the way, with film producer Richard Shaw to create the Watcher series, of course, and the Watcher 6 is out there, and so many others that he has been working on. L.A., hello there. We're going to have a great
Let me bring this up here. So let's have a looky-loo here. See, that's the benefits of having a page compared to the group. I wish you could do this in the group, but just simply can't. Okay. Hey guys, thanks for joining us here this afternoon. Uh, we're sitting around chatting here with our good friend Ken Sutton from the Learned Ones, and we're see. I knew this was going to happen because Skype always gives us these types of problems, guys. You just keep in mind from the past previous few shows that that these guys give us an issue. So for about the first 10 minutes, we may have some issues, but usually after the first 10 minutes, the problem's over. But anyways, I'll just carry on. We got our buddy Ken here, and this afternoon. See, Ken, I told you, so just kind of bear with me here for a few minutes and teaching us a little bit here because not all of us are versed or know much about
the proper order and do the instructions of one of the master teachers at that time. Elohim. The Anakim are the people. The key that's placed on the end of that is relations to earth. So